Hello, everyone, and welcome to the Ion Canon podcast, your home for in-depth discussion on the lore, the High Republic, and the whole canon of the galaxy far, far away. My name is Matthew, and I am back in Underworld North Studio in Toronto, Ontario, Canada. Yes, they let me back into the country. As always, I'm joined from across the continent by your friend and mine, Mr. Joel Davis. Joel, welcome back. Oh, it's good to see you again. I saw you a week ago, but how are you doing this week?
I'm good. I'm good. Where did you have to pay the Matthew tariff tax? Like I'm sure
Yes,
the tax was high.
yes,
Pay like
yes. No,
the Star Wars nerd tax, I guess, or
Star
podcast.
Wars nerd tax. I bought some comics actually. I found a neat comic book store in Kansas City. That
Oh,
yeah,
oh, that's
yeah,
cool. With it, did it have like stuff that don't see a lot, or
yeah. They had I forgot the name, but they had the animation art, and so they
Ooh.
had this uh like a still I think from the Tartakovsky Clone Wars.
Oh, that's
I
awesome.
think it's Anakin and Ventress. Pretty sure
Ooh.
it was
If
$450. I didn't buy
if
it,
you're
but
able to show it off in a future episode, let it.
yeah, I took a photo of it, but yeah, it's
Oh, nice.
pretty cool. Phantoms. Anyways, yes, I'm back. And welcome everyone, one and all. This week in the hut on Tatooine, old Ben harkens back to a time of prosperity and freedom when the Jedi Knights were the guardians of peace and justice in the galaxy. The High Republic Publishing Initiative shows us this era outright, and the name itself says as much. Even the Jedi are literally clad in gold, the golden shimmer of the age. So, what's in a golden age? Do they even exist in our real world? If not, then why does Star Wars storytelling often revolve around them? This week, we traverse the gulf between our real world and the galaxy far, far away. We'll get into that in just a bit. Get the plugs out of the way. First off, you can follow us on Twitter, Instagram, and Threads at Iron Cannon Pod, EYEONCANONPOD. Most of all, follow us on Blue Sky at Iron Cannon. Bisky.social is however it goes. Just Iron Cannon on Blue Sky. Definitely our most active account now, currently. So credit goes to you, Joel, for really keeping that going, especially. Yeah, and then you can also, if audio is more your speed, after every episode, I will upload this. I gotta go upload the last two. Actually, I forgot about that because I've been away. That's part of my workflow. Upload upload this episode to Spotify and Apple Podcasts is where you can find it. Search for Iron Cannon Podcast, not Iron Cannon, because you'll get the old feed that we don't have access to anymore. So just how passwords work. Anyway, look up Iron Cannon Podcast and you'll find it on Spotify and Apple Podcasts. Also, we are proudly part of the Star Wars Underworld Podcast Network. And here on the Underworld YouTube channel, we have YouTube memberships, we have super chats. And so, sorry, I'm not used to talking this much. If you chat with us, if you comment here, we will get your comment. If you super chat us, we'll get your comment immediately. We're happy, grateful for any support you can provide to the channel. Also, the Star Wars Underworld Discord server, vibrant, welcoming community that we got going on. I can check the link in the description below for a Minty Fresh invite into the thing, and Joel's cat can join the Discord as well. Actually, that's what you should do. You should create a and again, there's a pets channel in the
Yes,
Discord. There
we
we
have a
go.
pets channel and a food channel
And a
now.
food channel. Not to be confused the two. Do not confuse the two. It was a bad joke. Anyway, yes, the pet channel and food channel. I definitely posted in the food channel, barbecue watch, and of course the pets channel. There we go. Also, I think you had a movie night the other night. Any events coming up?
Yes, we will be doing a game night next week. Last week we watched a Batman movie, Batman: Mask of the Phantasm, and then probably the week after next, we'll hope to do another movie night. I won't say what movie just yet because I gotta confirm with Ben if we can do it,
Yes.
and I'm hoping to make it a special one. So
There
yeah,
we
we've
go.
been watching all sorts of fun movies,
Mhm.
really trying to expand our movie palette.
Sure. It's great to hear. Even though you watched a DC film, I'll let it slide. There's this once.
Oh,
There we
I
go.
mean, I didn't say we were never gonna not watch DC or
I
Marvel
know.
movies.
I have a thing about DC. It's a joke, but
Okay.
I have a
This is
love to
actually one
hate
of the
relationship.
best DC films, I'll
Yeah.
just say right now.
Oh, I'm sure it is.
Like,
Is it the Mark Hamill or is it something else?
yeah,
No.
this is Mark Hamill, Kevin Conroy. This is from the 1990s. This
Right.
is a movie from that is in continuity with Batman the Animated Series and is considered by many to be one of the best Batman movies ever theatrically.
All right, I guess I should watch it then.
The theatrical animated movie.
There we go. Which doesn't happen as much, although I watched the Oscars last night, and there's some good ones there. Last but not least, Track Room Comics reviews every Wednesday. Chris Abbott and I, yes, this coming Wednesday. I only missed the last one, but every Wednesday we review. We talk about the Star Wars comics that came out that week, came out that day. Hyperspace Stories Qui-Gon Jinn is finally coming out. Coming out. Also, Jedi Knights #1 finally coming out, and of course, we're going to the Rise of Skywalker adaptation that came out last week, so we're picking that one up as well. Get your prequelist love in there, get your sequelist love in there. Yeah,
Isn't Kylo Ren coming out this week or that next week?
I believe that's next week. Yeah.
Woo!
So, here we go. But yeah, so tune to that right here on the Underworld YouTube channel, Facebook, Twitch, and Iron Canon Twitch at 9 p.m. Eastern, 6 p.m. Pacific on Wednesday night, because Wednesdays are for comics, and comics are for Wednesdays. All right, that does it for the plugs. Joel, welcome me back. I'm glad to be back, I should say.
Welcome back.
How's your? Also say last week, I did pop in to talk a bit about the Andor trailer. So we don't need to worry too much about that. Although, if you have any other thoughts on that, feel free to share it. But what are you thinking up this week in Star Wars?
This week in Star Wars, I was just doing some thinking as I read Mask of Fear. I want to call it Mask of the Empire, but I would get too mixed up.
Yeah. Reign of the Empire, Mask of Fear.
Right, that Reign of the Empire is the trilogy name. Mask of Fear is the individual book.
Yes,
I always get those two mixed up.
Yeah.
I always forget this is technically a trilogy. It's just different authors, which is a little bit odd, but whatever. That's the trilogy's problem. I'm sure it'll be fine. But what do the Mask of Fear, Lie of the Jedi, Thrawn Ascendancy, Chaos Rising, and Lost Stars all have in common, Matthew?
So what's that again? Mask of Fear,
Thrawn Ascendancy, Lie of the Jedi, and Lost Stars. And this is a bit of a trick question.
Lost Stars. They're all Star Wars novels.
Exactly, and nothing else.
No.
That's a trick question.
Was that the answer? Did I get it right?
Yeah, you got it right. You got it right. That was a trick question.
Sure.
Because I was thinking about these 4 books in particular to kind of show that
I was joking. I was being silly, but okay.
No, you got it right. That's the only thing they have in common. But don't you find that really fascinating, though? These 4 books all say they're Star Wars books. And yet you cannot find, in my opinion, 4 different... And I just picked these out randomly, out of a hat. But you cannot find 4 very different types of Star Wars books. Lie of the Jedi is sort of like a high fantasy novel.
Sure.
I mean, you got Jedi in robes and, knights in shining armor. Thrawn Ascendancy is like a very alien sci-fi, a little bit of naval fiction, but not really Command and Conquer book. Mask of Fear is a political spy thriller. It's not really a spy thriller, more political thriller.
It's got a bit of spy stuff in there. But
It got some spy stuff, but it's more political thriller.
Yeah.
And then Lost Stars is a very good soap opera romance novel in the best sense of the word. In all the great and the cliches done well and fun. And yet they're all Star Wars books. I don't know. I was just thinking about that's the I think much like Star Wars on screen when you look at things like Andor, Mando, Skeleton Crew, and Ahsoka or Acolyte. The differences in genre and tone and focus and the types of storytelling.
Sure.
Star Wars books also have that, where it's like, here's a high fantasy book, here's a political thriller, here's a more sci-fi kind of thing going on, and then Lost Stars is just a full-on romance novel. And I don't know, I think that's why these things are like the stronger Star Wars books, when they really kind of have their own identity outside of just being, and here's Star Wars. I will say, Mask of Fear, just right now, is probably going to be in my top 10 of Star Wars books. Will it make top 5? I'm not judging that until after we're done with it, because I just think that's fair. But already from the beginning, 2 hours to go on my audiobook, definitely top 10, easily top 10. So, already there. So yeah, that's just kind of my thought. I posted a little thing on my thought on Blue Sky. Go check it out. Yeah, that was just my thoughts. I mean, I've had a bunch of thoughts recently, but that's sort of the more Star Wars book thought I have of
Yeah.
like, oh yeah, that's some good diversity in tone and storytelling in terms of Star Wars in book form.
Mhm.
I picked those four in particular because I think they stand out the most.
Yeah, Mask of Fear, it is so good. I definitely see top 10. Top 5, yeah, it's gonna be hard to tell. I've 100 pages. I got the thing in October and I only got 100 pages to go. You got to read that in a week. It'll be nice and fresh by the time we talk about it next week. Yeah, so El Cordova is this kind of, I say, any TikTok influencer slash science nerd. She was talking about how she was saying how sci-fi writ large is all other genres hanging out, going to a con or going to cosplay or whatever, or just
Mhm.
going to a party. And that's definitely true. That's a great way of putting it. And that it's just open to, yeah, that kind of diversity. It's also a factor of just this universe, this fictional universe that George Lucas created that
Mhm.
has spawned all these different sprawling stories. It has
Yeah.
all these aspects that, as we're going to go into later on, both do and don't mirror our real world. That's the thing, is all four of these novels do pick on some aspect correspondingly to our real world. Mask of Fear is stressful because of how real it is right now, but uh, yeah, I mean, even Tim Zahn must have done his research with naval commanders and what that would be like if you can, I guess submarine commanders, you can shift that into 3D space. That kind of feel, at least, of a uh, naval ship battle and a detective story. And I mean, that's the thing with Thrawn, it combines both of those two things,
Right.
disparate things in his own thing. And then, yeah, and of course, the world building. Well, I guess that's in the Ascendancy trilogy, is more that kind of world building. But yeah, it's a testament to the variety and diversity of the Star Wars galaxy, of the galaxy far, far away, that you can have all these kinds of stories, and that they're already based on things that are already built in. I said already, so I said, those are poor sentences. They're based on things that are
Mhm.
already built in, right? That we have an imperial senate that is newly formed, and what's going on there, what's happening there, the rise of an authoritarian government. Even if that's happened before, it is happening now. And so, I mean, I gather this book, we'll go into it more next week, but um, this book was in development during the first Trump administration, uh, coming home to roost in the second.
I would
That's
love to know actually, because like, well, was it
yeah.
or was it in the
Or on the
Biden?
heels of it, maybe. And then, yeah, Lost Stars. I mean, teenage romance in the backdrop of grand sweeping events. I mean, that's the teenage romance genre in so many ways. It's just, yeah, taken in these stories that we're so familiar with through the original trilogy, and then all the way to the Battle of Jakku. There's, what's so brilliant about it is the combination of both, and obviously Claudia Gray's ability to write prose. So, and to understand teenage motivations, right? That's the other thing, is Mon Mothma and Santa Ray and Thane Kyrell and uh there, are you muted? Or I can't hear you. Yeah. There you go. Anyway, I'm Mon Mothma and Thing.
Hello.
Yes, we're good. Um
I love that moment with Mom Mothma. I think it's so funny.
yeah, well, the Mon Mothma moment in Lost Stars,
Right.
but the Mon Mothma storyline in Mask of Fear,
Mhm.
you can we could say those are real people, right?
Oh yeah.
In the real world. And think Kyrell and Santa Ray and uh not so much Thrawn himself, but Thalius.
Yeah.
And I mean, I'm thinking the Ascendancy trilogy again, but or Eli Vanto, right? The self-insert characters,
And would you say that
you know.
depending on the genre and what the tone of the story is, you're willing to accept certain things more than others. Like I'm thinking about Lost Stars and like how Lost Stars like has everybody appear. Like Mon Mothma shows up, Tarkin shows
Mhm.
up, Vader shows
Yeah,
up, the Emperor, and it's like that's a lot of cameos. But I
yeah,
feel like I accept that in Lost Stars because
mhm,
Lost Stars is already such a schlocky, and I say this nicely, a
yeah.
schlocky romance in the Star Wars about these. It's like a more serious tag and bink where it's like, yeah, it's okay if all these characters that we all
Yeah,
know kind of show up because that's kind of the joke of like, here are these two characters
yeah,
seeing all the important events of Star Wars. Um, you know, and so of course they're gonna run into Luke and Mon and Tarkin and Vader. Whereas, I'm reading Mask of Fear right now,
mhm,
and that story, yeah, I mean, yes, there are Jedi in it, but it's so more grounded and,
mhm,
trying to make a political statement and whatnot. I think there would be like a tonal shift, and this isn't a
mhm,
spoiler, a
mhm.
tonal shift and like a complete 180 if like we get a Palpatine chapter and Palpatine's just like doing weird dark side force stuff and it's like it's not even political. He's just like doing like
Yeah,
summoning spirits of evil. It's like, look, I mean, I know they talked about Palpatine being a Sith Lord in the book and all, but it's
mhm,
like it'd be like go from like little bits of like he's a Sith Lord to like now 180, we're getting full on dark fantasy. He's Sauroning,
yeah,
demon summoning stuff. It's like, wait, hold on. Like that might work in Rise of Skywalker because that story is very high fantasy, but I don't think it's gonna
mhm.
work here, right?
Yeah. Well, the story wouldn't be able to revolve around that, right?
Right.
I mean, I could see Bale trying to using that to prove to Mon, but I mean, yeah, the story doesn't revolve around the Jedi either. It revolves around at least Bale's story revolves around trying to prove the Jedi's innocence,
Right.
right? So it revolves on his memories of the Jedi and how heroic they were, which kind of we'll get into in a minute. But yeah, it definitely the tonal thing. I mean, again, with Lost Stars, that's the conceit of what
Oh yeah.
Claudia Gray set out to do
Exactly.
is show these grand events through normal people's eyes, and that's why we love it. And so why we buy it. And, if a drunk Thane ends up almost barfing on Mon Mothma's uniform or whatever,
She
and
has so much patience.
she gets patient. So yeah, okay, that's I mean that heightening the embarrassment of that moment and
Mm,
the trepidation or whatever of that fragility of that moment, and then seeing her true colors come out, of course, and just the contrast with the Empire. It's used.
mhm,
This is the point. It's
right.
used to tell the story that used to tell Thane and Cyanna's
Mhm,
story. It's not superfluous. That's the thing.
right.
And so, yeah, makes sense.
Yeah, and I'll have some points to make about Mon Mothma next week about
Sure.
characterization and whatnot, because
Yeah.
that'll be fun. But we'll
Mm.
get to that next week, and I'm sure one of our guests will have much to say about
Oh
that.
yeah.
So yeah, that's just kind of my week of Star Wars. Just kind of
Hmm.
thinking about, wow, look at all like like when you're thinking about these types of books, like
Hmm.
they're so different, and that's why I
Yeah.
like.
I mean, I don't have much of a week in Star Wars. Just watched the Oscars last night. It was nice to see Dune Part Two win. I guess best special effects and sound. I think it won that too. Um, yeah, I believe that's right. And just nice to see Dune do so well. All those nominations. So
I'll give you a fun
maybe
Oscar nomination fact for Star Wars. The
yeah,
original '77 Star Wars was nominated actually for Best Picture,
right.
didn't win.
No, of course not. But it'd be interesting to see. I mean, if a Star War would ever be good enough. I mean, I think The Last Jedi would have been good enough to be nominated for Best Picture.
Would it have
But
won? I don't know, probably not.
no, but Black Panther won.
Did it win
Return of the
Best?
King won.
Did it win Best Picture?
Yeah,
I don't
didn't
think.
it?
No, I don't think
Didn't
it
win?
did. No, I don't think
Thought
it
it did.
did.
I
Uh,
could be wrong. Did well? I know Return of the King won.
no, it did not. It lost to Green
Okay,
Book.
okay, a movie I've never heard of. That's okay. Green Book.
Green Book. There's Viggo
Okay,
Mortensen in it.
sure.
Yeah.
Speaking of Viggo Mortensen, Return of the King. Yeah, but yeah, it's interesting. I mean, Luke himself, Mark Hamill, did best score, and they played the Star Wars theme while he walked out. Yeah, it was just, yeah, right. It's still Star Wars is still relevant in the wider cinematic world, which is nice to see. And I think Dune might have a part to play in that, right? Dune directly influencing George Lucas,
Right.
and yeah, so it'd be interesting to see if how and if a Star Wars film will do now that Star Wars. This is another big theme. Um, Sean Baker, the director, writer, and editor of Honora, which won all three and Best Picture. When he was up there, he said that films are meant to be seen in theaters. And my first thought was, but I got to tell people to turn their phones off in theaters and people stop talking in theaters. But to say how we're in this time now where there's uh, an artistic incentive to recapture the primacy of the theater going experience and an economic incentive, right? It is the best box office dollars. Films, the art form of film developed with that setting in mind. And now with streaming, it's moved and shifted. I'll be curious, I mean, Netflix had a lot of Oscar noms, but will Netflix even start to move towards theaters somehow, if that makes sense in their business model? I mean, clearly Disney Mouse House is, and so whether Disney Plus in that equation, obviously for after theater release and their back catalog and streaming series and things like that we've talked about, but definitely a moment where we all want to gather and go into theaters. I mean, even my childhood franchise tried to do a made for TV movie that was really a pilot, and yeah, it was interesting. Check out
Well,
the one.
Star Trek, I'll be honest, Star Trek has had mixed results with their
Yes.
movies
Oh,
more than
by and large, by definition, it's the odd number rule, right?
almost, yeah.
Yeah.
Except for the second Abrams. I mean, I don't know. I don't know if you
Yeah.
like. I don't know which Abrams you like, the first one or the second one more. I know people like the first one more and
Yeah.
dislike the second one more. So I
I
guess
mean,
that's
talking going back to
yeah.
the 80s, right?
Oh yeah,
Yeah.
yeah. Obviously.
But yeah, so that's another thing. Just what I was thinking about, how Lucasfilm is definitely on the forefoot with the front foot with going back to theaters, both for the artistic creative. Just there is something to be said for watching on a big screen, even if I have to tell people to turn their phone off, even if I have to tell people to
You just must have a
stop
bad
talking.
audience in your thing, because I never have that problem with my screen.
Literally every single time.
Oh,
Literally
dang.
every time. I have to tell someone, turn your phone off, stop talking, can you whisper? I want a is it Tarantino or who was it? Tarantino Scorsese owns a theater uh in LA where they take your phone away. And then I mean there's the Alamo where they come and say, "Hey, can you turn your phone off?" That's my dream. That's the dream. I wish that
Next
could
time, if
happen.
we ever forever together, Matthew, you should come with me because I get the wheelchair seats and they're like
Yeah.
quasi isolated from everybody in
Yeah.
some way. So maybe you'll have a better
Maybe.
experience
Maybe. Uh
because I never
we'll
had
we'll
that
talk.
problem.
We'll talk. I am heading your direction in July. So
Mm,
there we go. But
yeah,
yeah, I guess
make it
let's
up.
maybe we can Star Wars. We'll see if it works out. But yeah. Anyways, we're going back to a golden age of cinema potentially. We'll see.
Yes, or a
I
golden
don't know
age.
unless you had anything to respond to what I was saying. But
No, 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 I'm good.
all right, all right.
Um,
I just stepped all over my segue. But anyway, go ahead.
no, no, a golden age in Star Wars. For 1,000 generations, the Jedi Knights were the guardians of peace and justice in the Old Republic for the dark times, for the Empire. Young people named Darth. Okay, go.
Yes.
Um, so kind of before we actually begin the discussion, random
Mm,
question,
yeah.
kind of random insight. I
Mhm.
actually don't think Obi-Wan's talking about the High Republic when he's talking about that. I think he's talking about when he was young. I think he's talking about the Clone War. He was like, I was young and cool, and I was a badass. They called me the negotiator.
Yeah.
We used to kick butt and take names. Now I'm old and sad. Um,
He says for over 1,000 years, right? He's
well,
saying,
he's
or a
part of
thousand
that thousand
generations
years,
or
so
whatever. Thousand
so
generations, yeah. He's the end of it. The High Republic is the height of it. Anyway.
true. Although I wouldn't be surprised if a little bit he's thinking of his youth as well, like, I was a badass. But yeah, golden ages, dark ages, these terms that history has created for our understanding of the world and the ebbs and flows of civilization,
Mhm.
from the golden age of height of Rome to the dark ages of post Rome. Very Eurocentric. Um,
That too.
but here's the question. So I guess are we in a golden age now, according to our president? Um, but I guess to really first to think about this question,
Mhm.
we should really start thinking about the real world first before we apply it to Star
Yeah.
Wars. And I think the question we got to ask ourselves is: are golden ages and dark ages, for that matter, real, or are they just narratives devised by certain historians? Now, I want to be careful for a second because I don't
Mhm.
think we should necessarily say, oh, all history is subjective. That's people say that to deny certain things in history
Mhm.
that have happened.
True.
You know, um, so we got to be careful about that. Things happen. Very bad things have happened. But when we look back to categorize those events, good or ill or
Mhm.
neutral, the historians, like our good friend Mr. Chris Kemshaw. Hi. If you listen to this podcast, we hope to have you on one day. He talked about how it's all about making an argument. It's about making an argument about this time period. And I think a lot of historians always try to make arguments for certain time periods. And this goes back to the days of people who recorded Roman history. I've been
Mhm.
listening to a podcast recently, and they are talking about the works of a guy. I think his name's Seratonius. Might be
Yeah.
wrong, and
Probably
who's recorded like a lot of Roman history from Augustus
Suetonius, I think.
Suetonius, and he's recorded a lot of history of the emperors from
Mhm.
Augustus to Nero. And
Yeah.
when they talk about the podcast, they talk about how like yeah, his work's great, but you can sometimes see like maybe this guy has a bit of an agenda against I don't know, Caligula or
Mhm.
Tiberius, or Nero. Where some of the probably the weirder stuff probably happens. I mean, rich, powerful people are weird, as we
Yeah.
see to this day. But other times it's like, are they really these crazy, crazy people who are
Mhm.
being very friendly to their goats and horses every day? I don't know. Did Nero just play his harp while Rome burned? That's actually been disputed. Actually, that
Interesting.
he didn't actually do that. He actually did help out with the fire of Rome. Um,
Mm.
so there's actually a lot of evidence, maybe to the contrary, against the whole. He just played his harp while Rome burned. Um, so in our world as well, when we talk about
Mhm.
golden and dark ages, are they really real, or are they just these narratives to help make sense of certain things? And
Mhm.
again, narratives from a very limited perspective of the world. What could be the dark ages for European Western civilization might be a golden age for Middle Eastern or East Asian civilization. The Ottoman,
Mhm.
Western Rome was on fire, but Byzantium and the Ottomans, after them, they were doing
Mm.
pretty good. They
Yeah.
invented math, and China was strong,
Yeah.
and had a functioning bureaucracy.
Mhm.
So yeah, that's the question. So I guess I'll throw it to you, Matthew. Are golden and dark ages objectively real, or are they just these not fictional but storytelling narratives in a weird way?
So one thing it's really important to know and understand is that our notion of history as a recounting of not just discrete events, but even as cause and effect,
Mhm.
but as simply as retelling what happened. That's actually a very new idea. That's maybe the last 300-400 years. That's an Enlightenment idea. The irony is saying the Enlightenment itself is claiming a golden age for reason and progress that probably has never happened. The idea of, like you mentioned, Suetonius, my mind goes to a fellow named Eusebius of Caesarea, who his whole shtick was uh, God arranged the course of history so that a guy named Constantine would come to power and unite the empire. And and now the Constantinian era is the golden era.
I'm
And look,
sure
we have,
Constantine would love to hear that.
well, he definitely did that. That was his jam, right?
Yeah.
Basically commissioned the history of it, but it was in celebration of his reign.
Mhm.
So yeah, that this way of telling history. I mean, it can be helpful in pointing out, okay, this was an era where these good things happened, this time of innovation.
Mhm.
Things, but what it is, how do we evaluate what is good? It's us now looking back and saying these are things we value,
Mhm.
and this is where those things we value, where they come from.
Mhm.
So if we say human rights and democratic norms and freedom of speech and freedom of religion are good things, which they are,
Mhm.
we can say, oh yeah, the Enlightenment uh, was a positive thing to have happened.
Mhm.
If you say, but on the other hand, if you say kind of the strident secularism that tries to erase history, I'm not saying all secularism does that, but sometimes it does. Tries to erase a sense of faith, erase a sense of narrative. Ironically enough, then there's things about the Enlightenment that we can question, the liberal tradition that we can question. It's assumption of progress and inevitability over upholding tradition and our common, common sense of reality and existence through time. And yeah, not so great. And that's the odd thing is we started talking about history in this way, in this more kind of sanitized way, if I can say it, as a way of saying we're a golden age. We're in a golden age for reason and progress now. Uh, in much the same way you talked about ancient Rome and this idea of a dark age, the
I've been
dark
into
ages.
Rome lately, so that's why I
Yeah,
brought it up.
you talk about ancient Rome, and then you have the Middle Ages, and I brought kind of the high Middle Ages especially, and in between there's this thing called the Dark Ages, um, until up to Constantine, up to say Gregory the Great.
I thought the Dark Ages was after the fall of the Western Empire.
Yeah, so it's after the fall of the Western Empire, um, and by the barbarians and whatnot. But even to say, the even Dark Ages. But there's I guess there's two kinds of way of talking about Dark Ages, from my understanding. Yeah, so there's the fall of the Western Empire, and then you know between that and the High Middle Ages, there's this Dark Ages where uh, where the church institutions and the institutions of civil institutions in the West, civil society in the West had broken down. And then I guess Otto von Bismarck and others, not Otto von Bismarck, Otto the Great. Wrong millennium, Matthew.
19th century Bismarck,
No,
Michael.
I mean not ninth century, the ninth century guy.
Charlemagne, don't
Charlemagne.
forget me, good old
Yeah,
Charlemagne.
Charlemagne and Otto the Great and them refounding civilization. But but in this Dark Ages, it meant that the church was free to serve people more fully, more freely. Even before Constantine, you can say, okay, Eusebius will say Constantine, everything before Constantine was this horrendous persecution. What a terrible place to be in. And yes, it was. We don't want persecutions. But also, the church was more free to form communities and serve people and care for people. And so now we look back and say, uh, okay, there was something pure about the Christian faith before Constantine. Do we all wholesale reject what happened? No. Some do. A lot of folks do. That was terrible. Why do we get so in bed with the empire? That's a very good Star Wars theme, by the way.
It's like if the Jedi just decide, hey, let's serve the new emperor. We'll all be
Or
sisters.
or the Jedi said, hey, there's this separatist threat coming. Oh, look, a clone army. Huh? How did that get there?
It's true.
That's basically what uh, what's going on there, and at least the way I read it. So all that to say is no, there's no such thing as a golden age, because and the main reason there is because there are some aspects in every time, and this is actually maybe a comfort in our time in the last 2.5 months. In every time there is light and there's dark, and every time there's flourishing and there's suffering. It's simply part of the human story, part of the human drama, and we use these narratives to express certain values in the present. At least that's the real world, right? um and Star Wars
Oh,
is a whole other thing, but
oh
yeah, that's
yeah.
where I'd land.
I think kind of why I'm getting a little very annoyed with a lot of people. I mean, I guess have your feelings. So I'm not gonna say
Yeah.
if you're terrified, don't feel that way.
Mhm. Yeah.
Especially if you're a minority or something like that. But at the same time, I'm like, it's like I'll just say, people are acting as if, oh my God, Trump, America was great, and then Trump came, and then it all now goes to pits. I'm like, I don't know, how is Musk any different than Henry Ford? How's any of this different than William McKinley?
Mm,
How's any of this worse than the racism of the '60s and '50s?
right.
Um, a lot of conservatives say 1950 to 1959 was a golden age for America. It's like, and economically we were strong. We had you need just one person with a job, and you got a healthcare and doctor and dentist in the house. It's
Yep.
cheap. I mean, sure, if you were a white guy, um, try being black in that 1950 America. I don't
Mhm.
want to be that. No,
Mhm.
you do not want to be anything other than a white male in 1950s America.
Mhm.
Even then, it's like you're probably still on some drugs or something. Um, so it's like, yeah, that wasn't the golden age either than either. Um, and we always talk about looking back. I do think that we tend to always judge things based on our modern perception of the world. And
Yeah.
some of it, of course, should be judged harshly. I'm not saying, like,
Yeah.
you know, if I were to say, make excuses for people in 1930, say, well, of course Hitler was anti Semitic. Everyone was, which is true. Everyone was. Like, it's not like the Nazis. Nazis were like, the only anti-Semitic people. Like even the Allies, it's like even Churchill said probably
Right.
some not nice things about Jewish people. Everyone was anti-Semitic, but I'm not judging.
Yeah.
But at the same time, it's like that should probably still be judged badly. Like that's not good. You know,
Yeah.
you know, even the British who were on the side of the Allies were like, we don't want to give up India. That's ours. It's our colony. Or Canada. That's our dominion. We
Well,
rule.
no, they let us go because we were also white in
That's
English.
true. But India is different because they're
Yeah.
not white. But so it's like think like eugenics. It's like no, that was science back then, buddy. It
Yeah.
wasn't just regulated to one regime. Everyone was doing eugenics.
Mhm.
So some things should be judged still harshly by our modern things. And people were progress. There were people ahead of the curve in terms of progressivism. And then other times, it's sort of good just to kind of have context for things. Like if you're watching an old
True.
movie,
Yeah.
you know, here's a great. I mean, I'll use Star Wars. Gonna go back to Star Wars. People judge 77 Star Wars for like why is there aren't any a lot of people of color? Why is Leia the only real woman who talks? Um, should
Mhm.
that be critiqued? I mean, probably, but I think it's also important to remember that that was made in 1977,
Mhm.
and I don't know if George had been more radical with his casting, maybe a Star Trek, if Star Wars would have been as popular or
Mm.
mainstream at the time because of just the way society worked in the 1970s. I mean, maybe I don't know. Maybe that's an
Yeah.
excuse that I shouldn't use, but it's just something to think about. You know,
Yeah.
um, you know, people, unfortunately, we're more comfortable with just more white people. I think that's something certainly that has changed, and hopefully will continue to change as time has moved on. But that's something to think about in terms
Yeah.
mm, of judging things by the modern day societal curricula. Hey, well, again, something should be. Others we should consider the context. Would you want to
Well,
respond
I'll
to that?
just say, like, question it,
Yeah, yeah,
but not dismiss it. Is
yeah.
maybe the way of putting it.
Hmm.
Question uh when a text from the 30s says men, all men, and probably referring to men, but we can still apply it to be referring to all people if we want. and
All men
and, and
created equal under the law.
yeah, we question that, and yet we don't dismiss it, and we say, okay, what are they actually moving towards? And not that progress is inevitable,
Oh no.
but to your point about Henry Ford and McKinley and them, I mean, what it speaks to is the ebb and flow,
Hmm.
of things, because for even Nixon, he makes
Reagan too.
Reagan, but Nixon makes one major screw up, gets caught tapping, spying on the Democrat hotel, and he resigns. Trump does 3 Watergates a day, and he still goes. So he's still going, right? So we can talk about ebb and flow, uh, steps in the right direction, backsliding on a smaller scale,
Hmm.
and that people are saying we're going back to rolling away the safeguards that were in place since the 60s, since the Interstate Commerce
Since the New
Clause,
Deal in the 30s.
since the New Deal, even the cultural values that were instilled then. I think about where my brother lives is the birthplace of North American social democracy. The first social democratic government in North America was in Saskatchewan. And they say, and it's why Canada has universal health care, because they fought there first, and then the federal government said, yeah, that's a good idea, why not? um it was more complicated than that, but Saskatchewan now, they're a little embarrassed by that legacy. They want to probably privatize a bit of healthcare here and there, and you know they're kind of like, yeah, let the especially the oil companies and private big farm, big agro especially, is probably a big deal there, because they've forgotten some of the implications of their values. Here's the funny thing is with that is what's called crown corporations, which is government corporations owned by the government. They're able to be heavily subsidized. They're all over the place in Saskatchewan. Like their energy and their internet is a crown corporation. Their car insurance and health insurance or car insurance is so much cheaper, because they had this value of, we're going to come together, and that the government is the place where we can come together and uh, create solutions for everyone, as more people as possible. We've kind of forgotten that those are the implications of that, and so it's just interesting to, not so much a golden age or a this was during the Great Depression, right, where all these
Right.
things came up. So that was not a golden age, but
Oh.
it was a time of ferment, and it was a time of foment too. And that's the thing, and the reason the New Deal came about, and the reason one of the reasons the New Deal came about, the reasons, probably even the Marshall Plan to some extent, to hold back some of the more radical tendencies that people might have if they're starving and if they don't see any hope or future. And so that's the thing is it's not like we're necessarily in a dark age. If anything, this has been a gradual decline, really, since Bush, probably
Yeah.
even further.
Probably.
Uh, but is that a dark age? I don't know. I mean, we'll see. Can a dark age be this short? Is another question. The dark ages, which I don't think were dark ages so much. In some ways, they
Depends on where
were.
you lived.
Depends on
Right.
where you lived. But yes, the breakdown of Western European society had negative consequences, also had positive consequences. That was a few centuries. So we got some time to go here. you know,
Yeah,
to
yeah.
when the whole implications of all this will play
Although
out.
I'll say it's funny, I'm studying kind of Roman history. I'm
Yeah.
kind of back into it. Goths take over Rome.
Mhm.
It's funny that in some ways the Goths kind of become Romanized as more time
Yeah.
goes on. Like they didn't even dissolve the Senate really, so it's like they
Yeah.
it was a weird. It's not as like a clean break as you think it is.
Yeah.
It's Rome technically collapses, but it
Mhm.
also doesn't in some ways. It's complicated. We don't have time for it.
Yeah.
Go study it. It's really fascinating. But let's go back to Star Wars. Okay, let's get
Right.
back to
This is a
Star Wars.
Star Wars podcast. Sorry.
No. I love talking about this stuff. This is fun.
Yeah.
Um, I think when it comes to Star Wars, because Star Wars
Mhm.
is pure. Well, maybe not always, but a lot of Star Wars can be pure allegory and pure archetype. I think
Fantasy.
it's and fantasy and
Yeah.
high and fantasy a lot of the time too.
Mhm.
I think Star Wars, on a broad sense, loves to show the most clear-cut extremes of golden ages and dark times, right?
Mhm.
Where especially like Star Wars at its core, Star Wars is most of the time not about subtlety. That's why we love it.
It's true.
I mean, it can be. There are definitely more subtle characters than others.
Mhm.
Um, you know, but in terms of like kind of the broad strokes, right? I mean, look at the High Republic. It's called a golden age. The Jedi literally are wearing gold,
Mhm.
and I think overall, when I read those books and stuff, I think they're really trying to hammer home that yes, there are still problems, but overall, society has these very good and light values. Like they're
Mhm.
beaming with the light and song of the Force and all
Mhm.
that stuff. And
Yeah.
then you get to the dark times, and the dark times are the darkest of times, right? You have a evil cackling emperor who shoots lightning out of his hands as the supreme ruler of the galaxy.
Mhm.
You have the most over the top villainous people in charge. Although I guess how different is that from the real world? Um, if anything, I maybe they might be too subtle in Star Wars. I don't know. Um, you got some. They're building things called Death Stars and Star Destroyers.
Yeah.
Right? So it wants to show that, yeah, this is a time when a lot of people are scared. Their values maybe are being repressed. It's kind of everyone
Mhm.
kind of has to be out for themselves. Sometimes, unfortunately, by necessity. It's an old saying of the world is bad, so because of that you can't be a good person even if you want to be.
Mhm.
There's a really interesting playwright who kind of has plays that are pretty much saying fix the world, because no matter how hard you try, you can't be a good person in a world that doesn't let you be a good person. It's sort of like, is it a you problem, or is the world so messed up that even if you try hard you can't? It's just
Right.
impossible, so you got to change the world fundamentally. um and I think Star Wars doesn't believe in golden ages in a sense. I mean, I think you can always argue, even from the beginning, Star Wars has always been a bit about nostalgia, going back to that Obi-Wan
Mhm.
line, because he was nostalgic for that time that
Yeah.
sounded awesome, and he made it sounded awesome, right?
Right.
I guess that kind of leads into the second question of, even if you do or don't believe in golden and dark ages, I think that Star Wars, and I guess the real world, doesn't say, well, no era doesn't have its own problems. Like, I think every era is going to have its problem. I think there's never a time and period where it's like, oh no, we had no problems. We're all
Mhm.
good. Um, and I think at least that's what Star Wars does with its golden ages. Even it's like, even if the High Republic can be considered a fantastical golden age, we still had our issues. We still had problems. I just think maybe just how we
Mm.
overcame those problems were what defined it as a golden age. But I'll let you respond now. That seems
Yeah,
smart.
I mean, Star Wars definitely does trade in golden ages.
Mm.
Well, what's fascinating
And
about High
Dark
Republic
Ages. And Dark
and
Ages.
Dark Ages, I mean, the Dark Times, the
The
Empire. What's
Sith ruled
fascinating?
the galaxy once. I'm sure that was terrible.
Well, yeah, and
In
when
the
the Sith
past,
ruled,
before the High
now
Republic.
it was about the same time frame. The Galactic Empire is about
Right.
the same time frame as Bush to Putin, or Bush to Putin, Bush to Trump. That was not so. That's a bit of a protein. So Bush to Putin, yeah, he's in charge.
Mm.
Um, but even then, the question of can the golden age can there be a dark age,
Hmm.
20-year dark age in the real world, but there can be a 20-year dark age in Star Wars, and it is, and it's the time of the Empire.
Hmm.
Of course, it's probably longer than that, right? I call it the late Republic. Again, I go back to Maul. Oh, sorry, I did have my decaf. I promise. I go back to Maul's thing in the Siege of Mandalore. Look around you; it's already fallen.
I'll
So
just say, but
yeah,
I just want to say before you continue, according to the official Star Wars Lucasfilm timeline,
yes,
the fall of the Jedi era, which is it's officially called, or as you call it, the Late Republic,
mhm,
is from 100 BBY to 19 BBY.
yeah. So yeah, I mean, you see some from the Acolyte. You see Vernestra and everything she's getting up to there. Um, so Star Wars definitely does trade in these uh this dichotomy between golden age and dark age, where on the whole most things are fine, things are going well, especially the institution, the Coruscant based government is trustworthy. The Coruscant based government is ruled by a Dark Lord. Coruscant based government, or the Chandrila based government, or wherever it is. Um, the reason for that, yeah, like you mentioned, it's this over the top fantasy that is using these larger than life ideas, larger than life images to communicate these ideas. And so the idea of a golden age is larger than life. It is not real life. The the High Republic. This is the fascinating thing is the luminous authors could have said, yeah, Obi-Wan, he's just being nostalgic for a bygone era.
That never
And he's
existed.
not just talking about the High Republic, but he could have been nostalgic. They could have said, oh, actually, the Jedi in this time they were just as corrupt as in any other time. They were just as beholden to power games. I know, the Chancellor could just move them around and manipulate them, but no, they're actually. It's wild that they actually are out for the good of the galaxy. The Chancellor is actually out for the good of the galaxy. There is this Nile threat because that is trying to divide, and here is Lena So in her great works trying to unite. Now, of course, there you could draw a line between Lena So and Chief Palpatine in kind of the state building and unifying becomes state building becomes a unity and diversity can slip into an enforced uniformity, but that's not the motivation of the era, and it it plays in this. We didn't even see this in Legends, right? Um,
Not this
you know, maybe
era.
maybe we see it in uh later on. I guess kind of later when in the New Republic when they're also trying to do their best, but there's also other threats usually involved and all that. So, um, and then the Imperial Remnant and who knows what. You know about this era better than I do. Yeah, it's just fascinating. Uh, question. I mean, here's why. Here's why is this is gets back to what I was saying again. It's um just like someone wants to make a narrative of real history,
Mhm.
saying this was a golden age to play up certain values they have in the present. Just like someone wants to make real history, saying this was a dark age, this was a decline. You could say a decline, narrative of decline, to play up certain values and make an argument in the present.
Mhm.
It's more legitimate if you say no, this is just a fictional universe. We know this is a fictional universe. Yeah, we're going to call it the High Republic and say we're going to play up certain values that we have. That whiteboard that Team Luminous did, all those values that they tease out in Star Wars, they've said, okay, let's use this kind of setting to do that. Whereas, I mean, one of my favorite legend stories of all time is called Dark Times. And yeah, it's use that circumstance to say, okay, what does it mean to be a Jedi in that time? Let's have a video game called Jedi Fallen Order, which is one of all of our favorite Star Wars video game, one of, if not the best Star Wars video game. Look at
Ooh, that's a hard claim. I know some people might dispute that to this day.
sure, but a lot of people would at least have it up there.
Oh, it certainly is. Yeah.
It's one of the great stories of the Disney canon, of the new canon. What does it mean for for an Order 66 survivor to find himself
Hmm.
in this time, right? There are these storytelling possibilities that are available, and these not just storytelling, but thematic possibilities that are available when the Order is firing at all cylinders. And there are thematic storytelling and thematic possibilities when it's being purged, and the Empire, and they're on the run, they're outlawed. Those are those fascinating questions. Um, yeah. I mean, and you have someone like Mon Mothma, who's like we were saying about Mask of Fear, kind of in the middle, where she is still trying to use the Senate, trying to pass this bill, and I'm curious to know. I'm not done yet. Curious to know just how it fails and what happens. Trying to
Oh,
pass
it's
this
gonna
bill.
fail. No, she has to succeed and strip the emperor of his powers. We know
Yes.
this.
Uh, but it takes her what 16, 17, 18 years to finally step down and say resign her Senate seat and say no, we have to resist. Um, to say really, I mean, even then she's still acknowledging that it's a dark time, but she's extrajudicial trials and
It'll
things like
be.
that. Yeah.
I'll be interested about that because we do know that at least even when she's still a senator, she's still doing some rebel
Sure.
extra illegal activities.
Another novel by Claudia Gray. Another young adult novel.
Oh yeah.
Mm.
Although we know this even from Leia, Princess of Alderaan,
Yeah,
and a couple other things that and I mean Andor, she's working with Luthen. She's giving money to his thing, so
true. Yeah.
not like she's just sitting in the Senate thinking I can just legislate my way out of this for
Mhm.
16 years.
Although
Um,
that is closer to the moment in Rebels, which
that's true.
we've got to see that referenced. We're not going to necessarily full on see it,
Mhm.
although that would be awesome now that they have the whole Ghost Crew cast. But I don't think we're going to see it, but it's got to be referenced in Andor.
We know Bale is quicker to move on the whole. We gotta do
Yes.
some spying and fulcrum and stuff.
Yeah. Well, because
Uh,
all around. There you go.
right.
How's it going, Tyler? Yeah,
Oh, I doubt.
good.
Yeah, talking about Legends. I mean, Legends had its thing where it's like I think the Tales of the Jedi comics, not the animated show.
Yeah, yeah.
Um, that I don't know if that was the golden age, but I know. I mean, it portrayed it very
I
much
mean,
like
there's multiple golden ages and dark
I mean,
ages.
no, it was definitely a time of, and I think I always think of it more like the Silmarillions, where it's like the Jedi, they definitely were the most light of light, and the Republic had their strong values, and they eventually did the right thing. But there was always darkness to come. But even when
Yeah.
the Sith Empire rose, the Jedi fought against it valiantly.
Mhm.
Um, I mean, I think kind of had its ups and flows, where it's like Knights of the Old Republic 2 with a bit of a Jedi Dark Age. Jedi kind of got purged a little bit.
Mhm.
The Republic didn't collapse, but it was definitely hit hard. But then Jedi rebuilt themselves back up again. Then there's a whole 300-year-old war between the Sith Empire and just madness. And then there was another Dark Age, which Darth Bane grew up in, where the Sith did kind of rule the galaxy more or less, and the Republic was
Mhm.
kind of just reduced to. Actually, you should reread. And I remember when we talked about this earlier, the Jedi Lords and stuff like that, where the Republic just kind of collapses, and the Jedi have to be like lords of the galaxy to keep the
Like,
light from the
when
Sith
is this?
Empire.
Like, which story is this?
This is the first Darth Bane book 'cause that
Oh
talks about
yeah,
like the tail end of the new Sith Wars,
yeah.
um, where the Republic as an institution kind of just gets reduced to Coruscant in the core, but the Jedi are out in the Outer Rim, like
Mm.
forming kingships and little mini states to kind of deflect Sith rule and keep some sort of civilization. It's not sadly it was never expanded upon that much in Legends because of the buyout. But so basically, yes. I think even in Legends you have
Mm.
golden and dark ages, kind of
Yeah.
up, down, up, down, up, down, up, down, up, down. Um, um, but yeah. I think you're right. I think because of the fantasy, we do get to see like, yeah, this is. It wasn't just a nostalgia thing for Obi Wan. Like, no, this time period was real, it mattered, and there was denial and there were problems, but the Jedi came at it, and they're probably gonna kick butt.
And the Jedi and the Republic,
And the
and
Republic too.
a guy named Reed Silas
Mm.
actually having a more serious understanding of history, saying, "Oh, let's actually is there a peaceable solution? Is there a humane solution to the nameless here?" I think
Right.
that's part of what's going to happen. That's the thing is the late Republic, they would have hacked and slashed their way through these nameless dogs.
Mhm.
Maybe some of them would Mace Windu probably would have, but Reed Silas won't. He has the Rod of Ages, and he's gonna lead them to the Promised Land.
Well, I think one thing I think is always good to remember is history isn't inevitable. You
Exactly.
know, I think that's always, and I think we talk about declines, we talk about
Hmm.
you know, rises. And we don't all one day wake up and just to say, let's begin a decline period.
Hmm.
Click the decline button, right? There are there are reasons why these happen, of course, but
Hmm.
it's not like we all wake up one day. It's like, oh, we're gonna go to a rising period, golden age. Click the button,
Yeah.
right? It's not a video game. Um,
Right.
and I think it's always the little things, and it could last long. Like these little things could last a long time that lead to years and years and years of decline. Like we were
Hmm.
talking about how, when I agree, I think we've been the American hegemonic post Cold War period ended with the Bush administration. I would say the Iraq War probably was the big catalyst for that one.
Hmm.
Um, and we've been on it ever since. Even Obama couldn't stop it. You know, Trump probably made it worse, but Biden couldn't stop it. Trump too
Hmm.
probably going to make it worse. Whether or not you believe he's going to be the president for life, or if we will have another Democrat, and I don't want. I don't know. Who knows? But if we did, I don't think they're going to necessarily stop it unless they're a miracle man. Um, so I think these declines and
Yeah.
rises are all these little things. And I think in Star Wars,
Hmm.
it will be interesting to see the post High Republic storyline afterwards and see sort of because obviously Star Wars, again, this is where Star Wars and fiction kind of butt heads a little bit. Is obviously there is a trajectory that we have to go to,
Yeah.
because we can't, unfortunately, we can't change the story. You know, we have to follow the narrative. Um, of of eventually Lena So will eventually be get succeeded by Palpatine. But it'll be kind of curious to see what were the little things
Hmm.
that the little twists and turns that maybe if the Republican Jedi zigged instead of zagged, that eventually leads up to Palpatine being the Emperor, right? I mean,
Right.
what are the little subtle things? What are the what could
Hmm.
have where could you have stopped right there, and maybe you could have reversed back the clock, right? Or maybe at some point you can't reverse back the clock. I had and I won't get into this too much. Maybe I'll save this for another week. But I had a thought in my head couple of weeks ago, and I was talking to some friends about it, of what if Mace Windu had killed Palpatine right there? What if
Hmm.
Anakin didn't intervene? Maybe he even didn't go to Palpatine, and Mace did it. He killed Palpatine right then and there. I don't think, even if Mace had killed Palpatine right there, I don't think that necessarily. Maybe you don't get the first galactic empire, but I don't think you're just easily, reverse back the clock to the pre-Clone Wars Republic and we call it a day. Um,
Right.
maybe you get a civil war, more likely, if you want to follow the Roman solution of you killed Caesar, you get a civil war, and then you get Augustus anyway. I think Anakin would be Octavian in this scenario, but I'll get into
Yeah,
that.
I was thinking that too. Right.
Um,
Anakin would be like, "What? He was my only chance to save Padme." You know.
did that make
He'd be like,
Tarkin Mark Anthony? I think that does. I've talked to some friends about it who think
anyway.
Tarkin. But anyway, yeah. So
Yeah.
I think you kind of get stuck with that period as well. So
Hmm.
I think about that. Um,
Yeah. I mean, to say so that's another kind of caveat on this, right?
right.
That there are declines. That there are possibly, and this is maybe what Toad's getting here, points of no return or points. And I don't know if we've hit there yet. We'll see what happens in 4 years. There are, or even 2 years with the midterms. There are points of there are turning points and things that you know. Yeah, that the decline has hit a moment where the mechanisms of democracy are just ground to a halt. I think something like Doge definitely shows the fact that it can continue and there's nothing to stop it. I mean, it's concerning. Joel, you agree it's concerning.
Oh yeah, I think so.
you know.
I mean, I'll say this about decline.
Yeah.
I think if we look to Star Wars too much,
Mm-hmm.
we think decline is a fast and dramatic
True.
thing. Rome didn't decline in a day. It took centuries to decline. In
Yeah.
fact, if you consider the Byzantines, the Roman empires continued, then, kept going.
Yeah.
Just didn't have the West. um,
Mm-hmm.
and, if you were a Roman living in the period of Roman decline,
Mm-hmm.
you might live in a world where you think, hey, maybe we're on the up and up. I was learning about Diocletian the other day.
Right.
Getting into Roman history, so much fun. And
Yeah.
at Diocletian, he did a lot of reforms and stuff. And after his rule, people were like, hey, maybe Rome's on the up and up. And then the decline continued anyway, even if you felt
Yeah.
or kind of get a little controversial myself. If we consider your take, Matthew, that the decline of America began under Bush, you'd
I mean, I
think,
go even further than that. I'd say Nixon, Reagan, but
yeah, sure. I mean, if you want to go that far, I'm 100% with you there.
yeah,
But hey, if you saw the election of Obama, you probably thought, hey,
yeah.
you're on the up and up.
Hope.
But maybe,
Yes, we
but
can.
maybe, then 8 years later, Trump. And then maybe you thought, hey, Biden back. Maybe we're on the up and up. Nope.
I didn't
Right.
bet with
So
Biden, but yeah,
I mean, okay, that's fair. No, I don't think any of
yeah,
us really did. But I think that decline is not as an overt view
no,
as you think, and there will be moments where you think, hey, maybe we're on the up and up, and then historians will later say, oh no, you're still going down. It's
so
like, this is a
yeah,
weird take. It's like weight loss. Because if you ever have weight loss,
sure,
done weight loss like I have, um,
sure.
you have trends. You have like 1 week. If you weigh yourself week to week,
Mm-hmm.
you'll go up in your weight, and then you'll kind of go down, and then you go up again sometimes. But if you look at the wider macro trend, it's more like
Mm-hmm.
zoop, 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 zoop,
Yeah,
zoop. And I wonder if that will be what Star Wars shows. Like, hey, after Lena So, there was another great chancellor, and then maybe a not so good chancellor, and maybe even like in the acolyte times, like after a not so great chancellor, hey, this really cool chancellor's coming in, but like, oh, we're still declining anyway, just even
yeah.
if this cool chancellor came in.
And then Grandmaster Vernestra Rowe. Well, that's the interesting thing is, remember in the Acolyte, the Jedi Council, they were all leave the kids there, leave the kids alone, don't worry about it, just move on. And it was Master Soul and Vernestra trying to cover it up, and Master Soul trying to take matters into his own hands, and then Vernestra covering it up, and that's that's where the decline, where one of the paths they went right and they could have gone left.
Right.
Yeah, it's true, and that's the thing is we have uh these narratives of decline, yeah, that are these step ladder things. But again, even decline isn't inevitable. That's the wild thing, right?
No.
We you just like ascendancy is inevitable. What is, I think, inevitable is, so what the thing about decline, here's the thing about narratives of decline, is that they're trying to point to a few specifics
Mhm.
when they're by and large environmental. So here's what I mean when it comes to America is, say, conservatives are pointing to a loss of community and a loss of values, traditional values, as a point of decline. And so that's why they believe Trump is making America great again. Conservatives are pointing to, I mean, shoot, here I'm going to be very controversial. well, I'll try not to be too controversial. Pointing to, uh, you know, tax cuts on billionaires and, um, just well, just all the different things Trump is doing. The erosion of democratic norms. Even that isn't the cause of decline. Those are all just symptoms. The real decline is of America's place as the world power, and that is simply because uh, China and Russia and India and probably Brazil have caught up, right? Especially China.
Oh, yeah.
It's because the EU has had decades of experience being a block unto itself, and is now their standard of living has definitely outpaced the US. And you can either, and that's the thing, is you can either acknowledge that, or I think in the Trump case, America is the best. Anyone who says America is the greatest nation on earth is deluding themselves. Anyone who says anyone is the greatest nation on earth is deluding themselves. Canadians will never say that. We got some good things going, but we'll never say, well, the great, because who cares about being the greatest nation on earth? What about being contributors to the global human family? And so, and that's a good Canadian value there. But another example is, we talk about the decline of Christianity in the West, right? And we point to similar kinds of things. We point to, liberal progressive values in the church. People, the argument against full inclusion of LGBTQ folks was, that's leading to our irrelevance and decline. Or folks point to, we people are too closed-minded and care too much about doctrine and theology, then they just need to love people, and that's the reason of the decline. And I was at a talk at the conference in Kansas City. The talk was, no, the reason for the decline is secularism. There's the air in which we breathe, the Enlightenment ideals have come to a point where, and our lack of agreement, lack of common cause among churches has come to a point where, it's actually weird for me to be talking about these things on a podcast about Star Wars. It's just religion, faith is not a very commonly known, understood public thing. It's considered a private, personal thing. That is the air we breathe. In that climate, of course, mainline church institutions like Catholics and Anglicans, Episcopalians, Lutherans, etc., are going to be in decline because it's just not the thing to do anymore. Going to church on Sunday is not the thing to do anymore. And so, that's trying to bring it back to Star Wars here, but we need to look at, that's just it. The environmental thing. Again, I think about Darth Maul and everything he was saying about the idea of that, and that's what Lena So represents versus even Finis Valorum. Yes, Finis Valorum has entered the chat. Even that's what this trade dispute on Naboo is about. Lena So, she's out there with her great works, trying to actually bring people together and again build this galactic community, going into the expansion region, into even the Outer Rim, to do this, having this starlight beacon to symbolize this, and of course that's why it's the Nile target. Whereas by Valorum's time, this taxation of outlying trade routes is taken to be what the real air that they breathe in the galaxy, of this conflict between the core and the periphery, and how and it is a human centric, Coruscant centric galaxy. It's continuing to consolidate and close in on itself, and therefore it's not about building community, it's about amassing power, amassing wealth.
Right.
And so that's, if anything, that's Palpatine says, yep, there, it's time to go, let's do this. When Plagueis says that, yeah, it's time to do this, that's what we can take over the galaxy. So that's the thing we say is the reason the Sith wouldn't have a chance in the High Republic. People, there was just too much of an emphasis on common good and build. And then again, it's a golden age and a dark age. It's not the way I see. I certainly don't see 50s year Christendom as being this golden age. I see there are things about that we can learn, and we can say maybe those things can be applied to everybody. Maybe we can talk about having more tighter knit communities in cities, and common spaces in cities. Maybe what the circumstances that led to universal health care were the Great Depression, but this emphasis on coming together as a province, as a people, and saying we're going to take care of people. Obviously those are things that we can recapture from the 30s and the 40s even. But yeah, it's just the different. It's we got to look at the air we're breathing, and that's
I mean, you said something interesting, and I think it's also important to hammer home.
Mhm.
Palpatine's not the cause of decline. He's a symptom of it. He is just
Yeah.
a symptom of it. As our friends at the Daughter of Ferrex podcast. You might be seeing them soon. Um,
Mhm.
we're gonna actually have one of them on for this episode.
Yeah.
Um, hey, Sophie, if you're listening, comment on this. We love to hear your thoughts in the chat.
Yeah.
But they bring up a good they during their rise and fall of the Galactic Empire
Mhm.
episode. They brought up a good point that Palpatine, yeah, he caused the Empire to be created, and he's like both is and is not the most important person of the Empire's
Mhm.
creation. And I think they're right. If does another kind of other thought, if even before Phantom Menace or during Phantom Menace, if
Mhm.
by wild coincidence he and Plagueis both blew up in a space crash,
Mhm.
both dead.
Yeah.
Does the decline of the Republic stop? If not him, then maybe Tarkin or somebody else tries this, or
Mhm.
you just get a more chaotic decline of the Republic anyway. Maybe it doesn't become an
Yeah.
empire. Maybe it just dissolves. I don't know.
It's a similar thing you were saying with Mace Windu and
Right.
Anakin, right?
Right.
So yeah, it's what we need. We need Revenge of the Sith Infinities. That's
No,
what we
we
need.
we do, and I would write it, and I'm just gonna base it off of the death of Julius Caesar,
Yeah.
right? I mean, Tarkin's gonna be Mark Antony. I'm gonna have Anakin be Augustus.
There we go.
Poor Padme though, because I don't think she's gonna be happy either way. Anakin becomes emperor anyway, maybe.
I mean, isn't the Revenge of the Sith video game? There's a non-canon version. If you as Anakin, as Vader, you play Anakin as Vader, and you beat the Mustafar, you beat Obi-Wan on Mustafar, because you can fight. I think you can duel
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
as, and if you win, then Palpatine comes down, and then you kill Palpatine, and you become the Emperor.
Pretty much. It's not that deep as you think it is. But yeah,
Okay.
that's pretty much what happened. So,
Yeah.
that's my pitch for Register Squad.
Yeah, but I
Just
guess it's the closest we've gotten to that is that
do
video game.
do the death of Caesar with Mace Windu as Brutus. E2 Mace Windu. That rhymes. And then and Anakin becomes Octavian.
Yeah.
Um. So yeah.
Yeah.
I guess another thing. I mean, I have this in my notes.
Mhm.
We could talk about with this is you know how do other fictional
Mhm.
universes, deal with this sort of question?
Yeah.
And the two I think about a lot are Lord of the Rings, or I guess Tolkien's the Legendarium for the deep nerd cut in there, and Star Trek. Um, so we'll start with Star Trek because you're this Trekkie. I mean, you're a Tolkien head too, like me.
Yeah.
Trek
Mhm.
doesn't believe in golden ages because that's just not what Trek is about. Trek has always been about the future,
Mhm.
man moving into the future. The golden age is now. The time of great human. We are always our best selves is now.
Mhm.
The past has got all that eugenics wars and World War III and that one episode of DS9 where they go to 2024, look kind of like 2024 today.
Yeah.
Um, and everything's crud, just like today.
They're all sanctuaries, tent cities.
Yeah.
Hmm.
And it's like no, today's the future.
Hmm.
So well, Lord of the Rings or Tolkien's Legendarium is interesting because the grand narrative of the Legendarium, the history of Middle Earth,
Hmm.
is kind of one of decline when you really think about it. And here's what I mean. So yeah, Erdu creates the universe. Erdu is God, in case
Yeah.
you're wondering, the god of Middle Earth. Um, and you get the first age, and the first age, I mean, they never say like there's never a time where there's no problems. It's just the first age is just more grander and epic. So
Hmm.
while the light is the light, the most lightiest of lights, the elvish light and the Gondolin's light, the dark is also the most dark. Like Morgoth's got like hundreds of Balrogs under his command and trillions of orcs, and Shelob's mother is huge and bigger than her and scarier. All that good stuff. And then you get to the second age. And the
Hmm.
second age, kind of weirdly happened after a somewhat apocalypse because half of Middle Earth sank into the ocean. Um, but second age still got a lot of magic, but the elves are kind of starting to head off. But there's still a lot of light there. But it's not as epic as the first age. Sauron's not as epic as Morgoth. If you reread the power, you kind of see why he's not as epic as Morgoth. He
Hmm.
needs rings to make himself more epic.
Yeah.
Um, and then you get to the third age. It's like the age of men is coming. Yeah, Gondor can sometimes be cool, but the elves and the magic is dwindling, and kind of the mysticism is there,
Hmm.
being lost. And kind of the idea is Middle Earth becoming more like our world, and Tolkien hates our world. Um, he really hates
Yeah.
industrialization and progress and technology.
And secularism. Yeah.
Yeah, he's be very anti all that. It's very funny being a Tolkien fan and the leftist. I'll just say.
Yeah.
But so in some ways, Middle Earth is a story of perpetual decline. It's funny, right? Middle Earth is a story of perpetual decline. Star Trek is about ascendancy, and
Hmm.
Star Wars is almost like a cycle. Like Balin says, the cycle again and
Yeah.
again of ascendancy, decline, ascendancy, decline, ascendancy, decline. I just think that's fascinating. I don't know if I
Yeah.
have a point to any of that.
Well, to say, Roddenberry was definitely speaking to that enlightenment, that especially the 60s, this optimism that we were going to figure it out. We will figure it out. Yeah, we may have to go through World War III, but at the end of World War III, we get to fly faster than light. We figure that out, and we encounter other
Vulcans,
species. We encounter Vulcans. We go into the Federation and all that. Definitely, yeah. Well, so if Roddenberry does have a golden age, it's in the future.
right?
It's in some inevitable future that will come to pass. Because when we, the Lenin thing, when we get rid of religion and uh, lumping in
Capitalism.
religion with capitalism and with creed and power, and I hear Lenin's point, divisive
I can agree with him on
sectarian
the
vibes.
capitalism thing the most. I'll think say that.
Yeah, like divisive sectarianism of various kinds. And once we let reason bring out our better angels,
Logic.
then we'll figure this out and we'll have this United Federation of Planets. It's in this future golden age. Tolkien is writing directly in the face of that idea, right? He's saying, no, that idea is what's driven the mechanization and technocratic progress that led to World War One and World War Two, and ultimately World War Two. It's industrial in the Industrial Revolution, right?
Hmm.
He's saying that's what grinds people down, and what we need to do is harken back to a time, and yeah, he says, the first age or whatever, harken back to a time when people had an imagination about angels and saints and sacraments and the church, right? He's a medievalist and he wants to harken back to the Middle Ages.
Anarcho-monarchist is what our friends like to call him.
Yeah, it's that's fascinating, right? Like he doesn't necessarily want a dictatorial rule, but he does want a kind of medieval monarchy, a papal monarchy, if you will. He doesn't necessarily, I don't know if he comes out and says that, but clearly he's writing in this idea of a golden age in the past. And that's the fascinating thing. In comes George Lucas saying, "You guys are both missing the point. Let's talk about what matters in the present, and let's do it by, I mean, then in the 1977, harkening back to a time before, and then in 1999 saying, okay, this time before had some good things and had some pretty terrible things, and then again along comes Team Luminous to say, okay, let's really go back. And so, and that is something that's possible in Star Wars, that is really possible in Lord of the Rings, because to really go back, you have to go back eons. It's really not possible in Star Trek, because you go back 100 years, 200 years, you're going down the slope, right? You're going to
Welcome to our world.
you're going to our world, or you're going to your Event Enterprise, which is supposedly better than our world, but still iffy. And that's the thing is, I mean, what I think the way I've put it, though, and this is the odd thing with this whole discussion, is we're talking about golden ages in Star Wars. Star Trek, I've said this multiple times. Gene Roddenberry was an optimist, and we need his aspirational vision now. And we're getting it in New Trek. Tolkien was
a pessimist,
pessimist in a lot of ways, and we need his criticism, his critique, his questions of our assumptions, of our technocratic and technological assumptions, and our loss of values and community. George was a realist. He's saying, okay, there is this great beyond that unites us and binds us. We will always have choices to make about how we follow that or not. And I mean, that's why I find it, of the three, the most compelling. Obviously, I love Star Trek, but and I would get more into Lord of the Rings if I could read more of it. But definitely Rings of Power is a great one. But yeah, it's good to put this up as a contrast, in that, Star Wars has golden ages, but they're smaller and they're shorter, and they can lead to a decline, whereas then decline, but then a resurgence, right? I mean, I'm really curious again what the Rey film and what everything in that
and Sean Levy film, apparently,
and the Sean Levy film, and everything after said after Rise of Skywalker, what this great rebuilding is and what the opportunities there. Do people consider that a dark age because there's no Coruscant government or no central government institutions really left? Is that considered a dark age, or is that considered a great opportunity? I mean, that's the thing with the fall of Rome. Is that a dark age, or is that a great opportunity? Yeah, it's complicated because you have it was a
if you're living in Constantinople, man, you're like, what changed? How we lost the East? Oh, who cares? No good here.
But if you were a Goth or whatever, or Randall, whatever. All right. If you were a normal Roman citizen, the Goths would be coming at your door. But I mean, from what you're saying is, they knocked some buildings down, but
some of them became Christians. So it's like,
I mean, that's the thing. They virtually all became Christians, right? Whether or not you think that's a good thing or not, that's a whole other thing. Because whether or not you think the High Middle Ages was a golden age or a dark age, bring it back. To say that George Lucas is realistic in that question, right? Ultimately, and ultimately part of the DNA of Star Wars is that there can be eras in which the galactic community can come together and do well and have norms. I mean, even that's the thing about Gene Roddenberry, the 60s, the formation of the UN, all that time, the flourishing of public transit, different, the flourishing of the welfare state,
Civil rights movement,
of the
man.
civil rights movement, and it took a lot of struggle and a lot of hardship, but you know, that's again, that's when Canada and so many other places got universal health care,
Mhm.
for example. Uh, reform, education reforms, all these things. We can say that was a good time. Was it inevitable? Do we understand why Gene Roddenberry thought that would be things would just continue on? Yeah, because that was the air he breathed. Was it inevitable? No. Uh, was it something maybe we should consider the values of? Yeah. But
Yeah.
that's the thing, and that's the era that George Lucas grew up in, and so that's what he brings to the table.
Yeah. If you want, by the way, if you want to ever go back to what Tolkien thought, I feel like
Yeah.
Aragorn being king of Gondor is kind of closest because Aragorn's the king,
Yeah.
and he's going to be a good king, but it's not like he's telling individuals to like, hey, you gotta have a big picture of me in your house or something. It's like
Yeah.
people kind of get to you stay to your own devices, and it's like the hobbits kind of
Mhm.
live freely and they have
I
their
mean,
rights
but
and
he's a
privileges.
human king. He's not
Yeah,
an elven king,
or a
you know,
Sauron, who is imposing everything on
or
everyone. Or
Sauron. On the other hand, yeah.
um, yeah. So I think we'll make this the final topic of this
Hmm.
podcast as we near the 2 hour mark.
Hmm.
We have the High Republic era, the Fall of the Jedi era. That's the prequels and the Acolyte.
Hmm.
The Reign of the Empire era. That's basically good chunk of the Dark Times. The Age of Rebellion. That's the original trilogy.
Hmm.
The New Republic era. That's the Mandoverse. The Rise of the First Order era, which is the sequel trilogy,
Another
and,
decline.
and a little bit of Bloodline. No, that's the sequel trilogy.
Yeah, I know. I'm saying another decline.
Yeah, we don't have the New Jedi Order era, and we don't have the Dawn of the Jedi era or the Old Republic era.
Hmm.
And all three. When we talked about these eras, I am curious to see. Sorry. Um. Uh, what sort of how the authors, movie makers,
Hmm.
the sort of the overarching powers that be. Because I do think that because they have these eras that are divided, the powers that be at Lucasfilm kind of have like a specific, maybe not story, but certain like, okay, if you're gonna do stories in this era, we kind of want a little bit of a certain tone,
Yeah.
to go for it. And I do kind of wonder, like, well, what are they gonna go for? Like, there is
Hmm.
sort of a bit of the old republic era kind of ends in a sort of a quasi-apocalyptic war between the giants that sort of resets everything. At least that's what it sounds like from the
Hmm.
little bits and bobs we've gotten, the little speckles of what canon old republic is like. We have no idea what Dawn of the Jedi Dawn of the Jedi era is going to be until Mangled makes it. And then again, with this Ray film, like what is sort
Hmm.
of the overarching idea here? And
Yeah.
it'll be curious. Like I guess if you want to have some symmetry of decline and fall, then I guess if High Republic is a ascendancy era, then maybe the Old Republic overall is a decline era, and
Hmm.
then the Dawn of the Jedi is a rising era. I mean, it's got Dawn in the name, and maybe New Jedi Order is a rising era because again, New Jedi Order. That
Hmm.
that doesn't sound like a declining time to me. If the Jedi are going to rebuild themselves, um, unless they do decide, nope, Brave Jedi got purged, new Empire. Oh, I hope not. I hope not, but I don't think
Hmm.
they will. So yeah, I mean that's the vibe I'm getting. Where maybe the Old Republic era was overall a
Hmm.
kind of an interesting decline, but
Yeah.
what will that
Oh,
decline look
sorry.
like? Because you don't want to just repeat the prequels again. You got to make it
No.
somewhat different. I mean, look, if you want to do JJ prequel OT remix, I guess we're all fine with that. But I still want some differences in
Yeah.
it for sure. Um,
Hmm.
so I'll be kind of curious to see what these sort of three completely untapped eras will look like in terms of what are they trying to say? Is this a time of decline or is this a time of ascendance?
Yeah, that's kind of where I was thinking too when you were raising the question.
Mhm,
Especially the word old
mhm,
republic, old, decayed, frail, fraying, right?
mhm,
That has that connotation versus galactic republic and high republic.
mhm,
The reason why it's called the high republic, the reason why they go to these gold vestments and gold robes and have this sense of extroversion in the galaxy. It's in response to something, right? It's in response to a previous era, a previous set of norms that this new impetus is cut against.
Mhm,
The way this culture's ebb and flow,
mhm,
and in the great works, well, are as opposed to the not so great works. I don't know, the lesser works.
The mid works.
The mid works. Uh, yeah, I can definitely see. I mean, that's the thing. We have this Battle of Malachor, right?
Mhm.
Uh,
What
we have
happened there? I want
we
to
have
know.
this cataclysm, which the Jedi are supposedly guilty of, possibly setting off this super weapon. How did Jedi get the setting off a super weapon? That's different. The Jedi and Clone Wars was, I mean, the Death Star was originally supposed to be for the Republic, but maybe the Jedi didn't know about it, and if they had, they probably would have raised some questions. But here they are on Malachor, hitting the red button.
Who just a quick question. Who
Yeah.
actually says that? Because if it's Darth Maul who's saying that, then
So what
is
about the
he?
Death Star?
No, no, about the Malachor thing. It's like, is that
Well, it's implied kind of in Yoda sending Ezra to learn
okay?
a lesson.
All right.
That seems to me the gist I get. Obviously, I could be wrong. You're right. I could be wrong, but that seems to me. I mean, it isn't explored, but Dave Filoni knows what happened.
Tell us, Dave. We want to know.
Yeah. So yeah, no, I can definitely see that, especially if, and it'll be earned if the Dawn of the Jedi is more gleaming, if it is more kind of like what I was talking about with the Dark Ages, you know, um, and even in under Roman persecutions when Jedi are this minority.
I don't think the
Yeah.
Galactic Republic even formed by the time of the Dawn of the Jedi movie. So,
No, maybe not. So maybe they have a hand in forming the Republic.
mhm,
I can very well see that. I mean, no wonder the temple's on Coruscant. You know, that that makes sense. Just as the church had a hand in forming the medieval world and the medieval Western Europe, had a very strong hand in forming it. Uh, but then that, of course, leads to problems, as we see. Yeah, I can. It'll be. Yeah, I'm sure they have all this somewhat mapped out.
mhm,
It's also a matter of what does James Mangold want to bring? What does
right.
storyteller XYZ want to bring to uh to the table? Again, bringing things to the table. Um, do these things have to be so rigidly set in stone? Well, they can be. I think there may be just a general gist of
Oh,
something.
oh
I
yeah.
do wonder if they do want to set up these pillars like the Mangold film, like I don't know, whatever the next New Jedi Order film is going to be. Um, they want to set up these pillars to say this is what happened. It'll be probably film. I mean, this will be amazing. Is some sort of Battle of Malachor film,
That'd
or
be
like Lord of the Rings style, right? Like, or
would
like Battle of uh what's the battle that we're probably going to see at the end of Rings of Power?
yeah.
Um,
Slopes of Mordor. The Battle
on
of
the slopes of
Mordor.
like the battle of the slopes of Mordor, like the Battle of Malachor. That'll be something. Yeah.
Yeah. I mean, I want that. No, I mean,
Mhm.
they have to have these eras set up for a reason, right? I
Mhm.
mean, the Lucasfilm, have these little benchmarks, and like
Yeah.
they just don't make them willy nilly. I think there has to be like some sort of like, okay, Old Republic. This is the kind of stories you tell in the Old Republic era.
Mhm.
These are the kind of stories you tell in the High Republic era. Acolyte's kind of still in that era, but also it's a
Mhm.
maybe a bit of a Fall of the Jedi era story as well. Um,
Yeah, I will say the question is what's different is who decides these things, who's going to make the luminous type whiteboard. Hopefully, it is storytelling creatives like in Project Luminous. Someone like James Mangold probably getting together with the crew, maybe the story group. But yeah, I do think that that's a good blueprint at least to say these are the values of this era that we want to express.
I
Yeah.
remember I remember back when back when Lindelof was writing the uh the the Ray movie, and they talked
Mhm.
about there was like a writer's room and Filoni was part
Yeah,
of it, and I've always sort of equated that to, I think Lindelof just met the creative heads of Lucasfilm like Filoni in the story group to kind of map out, this is what we want from the new Jedi Order era. This is kind of what we're
yeah,
overarching going for. And then, hey, what's your script kind of more or less
mhm,
about, and does it match what we want? And then obviously not, because Bray was too old or something like that. And it's like,
yeah,
okay, even tonight you come in, but this is kind of our objectives here. Yeah,
yeah,
I can see that. Um, but yeah, I am curious to see what these two pre-High Republic eras are like,
mhm.
and what the new Jedi Order is like, and where do they kind of fall in the ascendance or decline uh periods of Star Wars history.
Yeah. I mean, one last thought there, though. It makes very fascinating real world problem because I mean the J.J. Abrams problem
Ow.
of how do you have a store group saying this is the kind of the values and ideas. I mean, even the Taika Waititi film, which is still somewhere. um, how do you tell these big name directors that you brought in with all the paying all this money? How do you tell them? Well, it has to have these values in this set. I mean, are you gonna? How are they? How are you gonna help them play in the sandbox? How do you or how rigidly do you make them play in the sandbox if you've built the sandbox? So that's the problem. Um, I'm on the side of the sandbox because I'm a Canon junkie because I've got a Canon podcast here.
Well, I
But
mean, they have fired directors in the past. They're the reason why Colin Trevorrow didn't do
true,
Episode 9.
true. But there's a reason why J.J. Abrams did though. That's, you
I
know,
mean, yeah, I think they thought he was good enough. I thought he got enough. I think he was what they
yeah,
needed, though.
it's fine. Yeah, it's fine. And the comic book is even better. Yeah,
No, I mean,
yeah,
I think I'm gonna be honest. I think they. I think you have to admit. I think Lucasfilm thinks J.J. Abrams does understand Star Wars better than Colin Trevorrow. I think you might
yeah.
not agree with Lucasfilm,
Better
but
than Colin Trevorrow.
that's what they thought. I mean, that's why they got him for Episode 7. So they were happy
Yeah,
with him.
yeah.
I think if they weren't happy with him on a fundamental level, they would have fired him.
True.
They
Yeah,
fired Lord and Miller, and I like
that's
Lord and
true.
Miller.
That's true. They're great.
They did Spider Verse.
Yeah, did a great job on that one. Uh, Also, JJ's daughter Gracie, big fan. Put it out there. Anyway,
So
yeah,
I mean, I think that certainly is definitely something the future president of Lucasfilm gonna have to balance creative.
mhm,
There's a whole good thread about that, of creative freedom versus, is this Star Wars without being not Star Wars.
yeah,
I think to them, J.J. Abrams was enough to, like, yeah, you're Star Wars enough. Apparently Lord Miller. I mean, you don't have to agree with that, but that's what they thought. I mean, that's what
yeah,
everyone. I think if Kathleen Kennedy really didn't think he was just doing it wrong, she would have fired him.
yeah. That's probably
Uh,
true.
um, again, if he can fire Lord and Miller, who I think are way more talented and do way more interesting things for Solo, than for whatever reason, then I think that would have been enough. And they haven't fired anybody since.
True.
Had anybody? No, I mean they've changed people's project, but never mid film. So
Yeah, I mean, yeah, not that far like not that far along in
right.
the process. That's true.
And I think
Um,
maybe they are just, they sort of, as they got along, they have picked better people to kind of have
True.
that balance of, like, I'm sure
Yeah.
Mangle will be fine. I
Also, it's been a while since they've had a film.
true.
It's all been Disney Plus. So
They got John Favreau is moved in the can.
yeah,
So they like John Favreau, in at least.
yes, they
Um,
definitely like John Favreau. That's true.
Um, we'll
Yeah.
see how they feel about Sean Levy, but it looks
Mhm.
like he might be coming along pretty nicely. So I guess Sean Levy's got the Star Wars. It's enough of a Star Wars person to
The
make it through.
imprimatur, nihil obstat. There's some Latin for you.
Well, let's see if Sean Levy makes it to the end.
Yeah,
I feel like if he doesn't, they'll just scrap the whole film, because it sounds like this is very much his project.
sure.
Um, But yeah, we'll have to see. But yeah, I'll be very curious to kind of see. I do think they're taking a little bit more of their cautious time,
Mhm.
rightfully and maybe wrongly, depending on who you ask. With at
I'd
least
say
this,
rightfully.
I think rightfully. Although if you take too long, it's like then it kind of feels like you don't have any confidence in yourself. So you got to balance it out between like be cautious, but also have some have some confidence in yourself. Take the shot, man. You know,
I mean, here's a question:
yeah.
Are you about to enter a golden age of Star Wars films?
I hope so.
See what I did there?
Yeah, I hope so. I hope so. But yeah, I
Mm,
mean, I think they're definitely taking a lot more time with this new era, probably learning the
mhm.
lessons of the sequels and kind of making sure, like,
Yeah,
hey, here's an era who can really stand on its own, has its own vibe and feel, even
yeah,
if Ray's still in it.
yeah.
Yep.
It's
So
a much
yeah,
older Ray,
much older Ray, but not that old because Daisy
not that
Ridley's
much older.
still
Yeah,
30, 35, still looking
mhm,
fine.
yeah.
Um, but yeah, I guess to wrap it up. Golden ages, dark ages. In the real world, it's more complicated. In the world of Star Wars, it's pretty cut and dry, even though I still think Star Wars at least is in pure rose tinted glasses of
Mhm.
High Republic. Everything was fine. Nothing bad happened. There was no Nile. What are you talking about?
It's an effective narrative device and thematic device, is what we will
Ex-
say.
exactly.
There we go.
Exactly.
There we
But
go.
yeah.
It's a good place to wrap things up. Thanks everyone for joining us. Thanks, folks chiming in the comments, etc. Let us know what you thought of our conversation tonight. What you thought of whatever we were talking about in this week. No, my mind is blank. Mask of Fear and the different varieties of stories in canon. That's what we were talking about, and also, of course, Golden Ages in the real world and claims of Golden Age in the real world. There's that. Oh my goodness, that film. Oh, I'm blanking on that film.
A great unknown?
No, came out a number of years ago. Anyway, it's about how there are no golden ages, and we the golden age we think is something that it's set now and or set in the 60s and then go back to the 20s or something. Anyway, the thing we think is a golden age, someone people back then thought an earlier era was a golden age because that's how the real world works. But in Star Wars, yeah, let's let's yeah, it's a good effective narrative and thematic device. Let us know what you thought of that. What you thought of golden ages in the real world and in a galaxy far, far away. What is your favorite era? What is your favorite age in Star Wars and why? Let us know in the comments below. Those aren't going anywhere on Facebook, on YouTube, I believe on Twitch as well. So please do comment below. Also, give this video a like and a share and subscribe to the channel if you haven't done so already. Joel, great discussion as always. Good Iron Cannon deep dive. Where can we find you on the internet?
Yes. Here, also, I'll leave everyone with a question. Do you think that the post-Tross era, who should there be a Diocletian and should they form the Tetrarchy? Um, will there be a constant? Who is the Constantine of Star Wars? There's a good question.
There we go.
In the past. All right. Yeah, you can find me at JID20234 on Blue Sky. To JID20234 on Blue Sky. I'm mostly just on the Star Wars Underworld Discord though, hanging out there. You can follow us, of course, at Ion Cannon Blue Sky, Bisky Social. Follow us there as well. We do a book of the day. This book of the day was Dark Saber by Kevin J. Anderson.
Nice.
So I picked that one at random. I just picked them at random. I don't have any rhyme or reason most of the
Sure.
time. So yeah, follow us there. Give us a like, subscribe. Of course, join us on the Star Wars Underworld Discord as well. Movie nights, game nights, and more.
Yeah. You can follow me on Instagram and Threads and Blue Sky MNEUG1138. Still on the Bird app at NEUG485. So yeah, check me out there. Also Instagram beaches.foodie, posting a few things from there. Personal Instagram, I posted one from the Negro Leagues Baseball Hall of Fame museum rather in Kansas City, Missouri. That's over on my Instagram, personal Instagram there, and of course, yeah, Iron Cannon Pod. Although, yeah, Iron Cannon, follow the Blue Sky. Go to Blue Sky. It's a fun place to be. Fun, quick plug. On in 2 weeks' time, Saturday, March 15th, 2025. I will be at Toronto Comic Con. If you're at Toronto Comic Con, and if you like Taylor Swift, I'm Ash and I are back. We'll talk about this more next week. Ash and I are back to do our third Taylor Swift panel. We'll hopefully get that recorded and up somewhere on the YouTube somewhere. Yeah, we're talking about Taylor Swift on screen. I got to prepare for that. I got to make notes for that. Yeah, different on-screen forays, trying to go a little nerdier than we usually do with those panels at Comic-Con Fan Expo. But yeah, I'll be there also representing Star Wars Underworld at Toronto Comic-Con 2025. Please do say hi if you're there. And yeah, Ash and I will say more next week, because next week we are talking about Mask of Fear review. Before that, though, again, got to mention the Tractor Beam Comics reviews. Chris Sabat and I are talking about Hyperspace Stories, Qui-Gon Jinn, Jedi Knights #1, and the Rise of Skywalker adaptation #1. Good on you, Jody Hauser. Glad you can get this book out. It's a fun addition to the sequel trilogy lore there.
And
But yeah,
completionists sigh a breath of relief.
yes, they do. There you go. Yes, and so yeah, please do follow us there. Keep us keep us in your sights here on the Underworld YouTube channel and Facebook and Twitch. Again, next week, as mentioned, we are chatting all about Mask of Fear by Alexander Freed. I gotta finish that novel. I'm gonna do some reading on that tonight. But yeah, please do stay tuned. We're getting Ash Wallace, the world's greatest Mon Mothma fan. If they both can make it, then Ellie, the world's greatest Star Wars political commentator. There we go. To join us. So should be a great conversation. Yeah, I'm really looking forward to finishing this novel and getting down to talking about it, because it's such a fantastic book. But yeah, I think that's about it. I think we got there. But yeah, all right. So yeah, please do join us Wednesday, and then join us again on Monday, 8:30 p.m. Eastern, 5:30 p.m. Pacific. Until then, Joel, let's blow this thing and head home.